What do you do when you get a cubic equation and you cannot take x as common? You look for an alternative way, because if that's what is happening, that you get a cubic equation and x cannot be taken common, that means there will be some alternative way of doing that question. So you try to figure out what that alternative way is. If I remember correctly, this happened in an APGP question recently, I think, that if you try to solve it one way, you end up with a cubic equation. But there's another alternative way of doing that as well without a cubic equation. So that's what you should be following. If you can share that question with me, I can maybe tell you how to do that as well. Okay. You have not done yearlies at all, but have done a lot of topicals. What should you do for time management? Uh, Now is not the time to, you know, do any yearly papers anymore. Uh, you just have to try and make sure that tomorrow you try to save some time in the questions that look relatively easier to you, right? So standard questions on binomial, APGP, circular measure, and a couple of other top coordinate geometry. If you get an easy questions, you try to save time on them. And for the other questions, then in which you will require to do a lot more thinking, you have more time left so that you're not making any careless mistakes. But the most important thing, the single most important thing to manage your time well in the exam is that you do not get stuck at any question in the middle of the paper. That is extremely important, the most important thing. If you have thought about a question for a couple of minutes and you cannot understand which direction you should go in, move on. Do not skip the whole question. A lot of times what happens is you cannot do one question, but you're not able to do one part, but the next part is relatively easier. So you do that as well, and then you move on. Okay. And then you come back to that question at the end of the paper afterwards. All right. This is not that. Okay, chale. Let me read your questions now one by one. I'm sorry, I was just setting a couple of things up. Alaikum assalam. Acha. Yeah, so when you're getting weird answers in some cases, it's a good idea to go back and check if your working is correct. A lot of times when you're solving quadratic equations, when the question does not mention that you have to get your answer to a specific number of decimal places or significant figures, a lot of times, mostly, you end up having something that can be factorized. So if factorization is not happening, I always tend to check if the working is all correct. Similarly, when you're copying information from one page to the next page, that is one very common point where you end up making careless mistakes when you're copying figures from one page to the other. So try to slow down a little when that happens. If you have a question that is on multiple pages and you're copying information, you need to make sure that you're copying that right. And after every 3-4 steps, it's a good idea to quickly glance at what you have done. Until that point, no, don't spend too much time rechecking again and again, because that will waste time as well. But after every 3-4 steps, it's a good idea to have a quick look at what you've done in the previous steps, 2-3 seconds, so that you can spot any careless mistakes right at that point. Because otherwise, uh, even though you are supposed to recheck your paper at the end, have at least 7-8 minutes at the end to recheck your paper, but it's relatively harder. In fact, it's much harder to spot any careless mistakes at the end of the paper as compared to uh, to slow things down while you're actually doing a longer working, and then try to avoid careless mistakes in the first place. And if you can check your working right after a question very quickly, just spend like 8 to 10 seconds. That will be it will be much more likely that you're able to spot any careless mistakes at that point rather than checking at the very end. So do try to do that after every question. Have a quick check, have a quick look at the answer. Doesn't even make sense in the context of the question. So for example, if you have a graph given, I mentioned this last time as well, if the graph has a point that is definitely going to have an x coordinate that is positive, for instance, and you're getting a negative value, then that means you've done something wrong. So always do a sanity check like that, right? So try to see if that answer makes sense in the context of the question or not. Whenever you get multiple answers, you always need to check that if both of them are possible or not. You will look at the question statement and see if they have given any condition for any one value to be not valid. You always do this whenever you have multiple answers. Then when you have a variable, for example, a lot of people, when they have equations like these, for instance, if you have something like this, x squared plus 2x, or let's say x squared equal to x, they end up doing this, that they would say x squared divided by x, that equals 2, and x equals 2 from that, and that is wrong. You should always avoid dividing by unknowns, avoid dividing by variables. Okay. So in this case, the value for x could also be 0, so you avoid dividing by that. The correct way of solving this would be that you do x squared minus 2x equal to 0, take x common, that leaves you with x minus 2 inside, and then you say x is equal to 0 or x equals 2, like that. So avoid dividing by variables in general. That holds true for variable x like this as well. And also if you have sine x, tan x, avoid dividing by that as much as possible, because in case its value could be 0, you would end up missing out on some possible solutions. Okay. Okay, so there's a question. If you end up getting a cubic equation like this, x cube minus, I'm just writing a random equation, minus 2x plus 6 equal to 0, and you're supposed to solve this equation. Now, first of all, you're not required to be able to solve such equations in paper one. So if you're ending up with an equation like this, what that means is there must be some alternative way of doing that question, which will be much simpler, much easier than this. But if you do end up getting this and you cannot figure out any alternative solution, what you can do in that point at that point is, if you can't figure anything else out, you can write down the answer from the calculator. So in case you need to use that answer in the next part, you will still be able to do the next part. You will not get the answer marks in this case or the method marks from this point onward, because you have not shown any working for this. However, if there was a part after this, you would still get partial marks for that. Okay. So there's another very common thing that happens to a lot of people. What they do is, for example, in a question like this, let's suppose they've done some working and they've, written down some things in a few lines. And at the end, they realize, okay, we cannot do something else after that. Now, they get stuck, they move on to the next question, and then at the very end of the paper, they would just cross out everything. Don't do that. Leave that working there. In case you can get some partial marks from that, you will just leave it there. You only cross out some working if you're replacing that with something else. If you're not replacing that with anything else, leave that working there, because you may get some partial marks from that. Okay. But to answer your question, if you get a cubic equation like this, you should look for another solution. If you can't, then you'll get some marks until this point. But from this point onward, you'll not get the method marks or the answer mark for that particular part. Okay, the next part still you can do, but for that particular part, you won't get any marks. ठीक है. अच्छा. Let me move on to the next questions. I'll answer questions on YouTube in a few minutes as well, inshallah. I'm just answering some questions on Zoom first. Can you show the question on screen? Explain that again, please. Which question, Aziz? Hania, Can you share that specific question that you mentioned, if that's what you're talking about? That had A. That had A. What question had A in it? Function question? I'm sorry, I'm really not sure what you're talking about because I just had some random screen showing earlier. Was it this question? I just explained this in a video, in a short video that I posted as well. So you can look at the explanation for that there. Acha, let me look at the next question. Acha, you're going, okay, so let me read out that whole statement. You were going over some marked transcript someone shared. They've done vertical translation first and then vertical stretch, despite the order being necessary. The marking scheme will have the alternate way as well, right? Yes, of course. So sometimes, I explained this in a video recently as well. Where was that? P1 revision workshop, and then function transformations. Okay, so sometimes when you have to identify transformations from a given graph, the easier way of doing such problems is you first of all identify the stretch that is happening. You first of all identify the stretch that is happening. Once you've identified that, you apply that stretch first, and then you see what next you have to do after that. Now, in this case, one possible solution is that you do a stretch along y-axis scale factor 3, and then you do translation after that. Now, in this case, the order is not even necessary because one is vertical and the other is horizontal. But if I look at another example, let's suppose this example. In this case, when we figure out a stretch initially, it becomes stretch along y-axis by scale factor 2, and then we do a reflection in y-axis, which is horizontal, and then a horizontal translation. Now, in this case, what the way I have done is I've done reflection first and then translation after that. Now, yes, marking scheme will have an alternative way of way of doing this as well, and that will be that they may have done a translation first and then reflection in y-axis after that. But in that case, the translation vector would be different. So in this case, if I were to do translation first, after that stretch, it would be a translation of 1, 0, and then reflection in in y-axis after that. So when the order changes, the translation vector is also going to change, or if it's a reflection or stretch, their line of if it's a stretch, the scale factor for that is also going to change because of that. Okay, so it's not that they would just write the same thing in a different order. When the order changes, the actual transformations also change, but both of them will be valid. This will also be valid, and the other option will also be valid. Okay. Acha. Now, is it right to work in columns? Is it allowed to work in columns? Now, examiner does recommend that you don't do that. Examiner does recommend that you don't do that. The reason for that that they give is that the examiner may not understand the flow of your working, as in if you do something here and then you do something here and then you move on to this step here and then you move on here. If you end up doing something like that while working in columns, examiner will not understand what you're doing and you may lose marks, not because examiner did not like that you worked in columns, but because the examiner cannot understand what you're trying to do. So if you do want to work in columns, you have to go in a proper flow. For example, you can do all the working like this here in one line, and then maybe if you want to continue, you can go there. However, you still have extra sheets available as well. If you want to be safer, you can avoid that as well. But if it's just like doing this, like we normally do, for example, when we have a quadratic equation, let's say, Let me write down a quadratic equation like this, or a quadratic function, y equals x squared minus 7x plus 12. Now, when I solve this quadratic, when I find the x-intercepts of this quadratic function, for instance, I would get 0 equals x squared minus 7x plus 12. I'll do some working. Now, I could get two values of x equals 3 and then x equals 4. Now, this is also something that you can interpret and work as working in columns, because you've got x equals 3 here, x equals 4 here. And then you can find one corresponding value of y from this, another corresponding value of y from this. In this case, that is 0, of course, but in case it was something else in which you have one value of x and you're getting a corresponding value of y from that, and another value of x from which you're getting another corresponding value of y, this is working in columns, but this is easy to understand what you're doing. So as long as you are sure that the examiner will be able to easily understand what is it is that you're trying to do, it is okay. But if you think the way you work in columns, it's going to be very confusing for the examiner to understand that what's the flow of your working, that you do one thing here, then another thing here, another thing here, then avoid that. Okay? So it's a decision for you to make then. It has to be clear what you're doing. That is important. Okay. Acha. And let me look at another question here. Which formulas for mensuration you need to know for the exam? You know the formula sheet. This is the formula sheet that you're given. You have some formulas for mensuration written on top. So you're given the formula for volume of sphere, surface area of sphere, and cone and pyramid. The formulas for prism, cylinder, they are not given. You need to remember them. Formulas for triangle, they are not given. You need to remember them. So these are the formulas for mensuration that are given. The rest you need to remember. Okay. Aziz, I just posted a short video, a reel as well, in which you can find that question solved that I was just showing there. This particular question, I explained that just recently. You can have a look at that. Let me look at the next one. Can you determine that a function has an inverse if we have proven that it is increasing or decreasing? Well, now, that's a very good question. If you have proved that a function f of x is increasing, let's suppose you've proved that a function f of x is increasing. I think it's in a recent paper as well. It's in some 2025 paper. Now, what does increasing mean? Increasing means that it is going in the upwards direction throughout. Now, whatever the shape of the curve is, it could look like this, it could look like this. Whatever the shape of the curve is, you can see there's no turning point of the curve. There's no point, if it's an increasing function, for instance, at no point do we have a turning point, because after a turning point, the curve would start going downwards and it will no longer be an increasing function. In cases like these, the function is always going to be one-to-one. That means it is not going to have an inverse, right? Because when a function does not have a turning point, the horizontal line test is always going to pass. So it's not going to be a one-to-one function. So any function which is increasing or decreasing throughout, a function that is increasing or decreasing throughout, it is always a one-to-one function. It is always a one-to-one function, and the inverse will exist for that. Okay. Complementary angle stuff, is that important? What you're referring to is this. P1 trigonometry. Complementary angle identities. These are important. You must know them. They're not given in the formula sheet. Sine 90 minus theta is cos theta. Cos 90 minus theta is sine theta. Tan 90 minus theta is 1 over tan theta. Okay. You need to remember them. Although it has not been tested in recent papers, but you're supposed to know this. They can test it. We do use them in some other components. Sometimes in mechanics, we often use it. So there's always a first time for something, as in it. If it hasn't happened in the last 5 years, doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it would not happen in your paper. So you do need to remember these as well. Okay. As long as your working is clear, it is okay. Okay. Recommended duas for tomorrow afternoon. Uh, I don't have any specific duas. As long as it's heartfelt, inshallah, it'll do wonders. You can pray. You should pray the Hajjat and then pray Fajr and then have a good sleep if you don't sleep early at night. Avoid any sins. That is more important, and that'll have barakah, inshallah. So you seem to. Yeah, that's a good point actually. I like dark colors. So it looks black, but sometimes it's dark blue, sometimes it's gray. But yeah. But yeah, it's often black as well, that's true. Imagine. Mohit, please no. Where's Mohit? Okay, please no random messages. Please don't do that. Okay, so the formula that you got for a geometric progression, the formula that we've got for a geometric progression, will it always work? The sum formula? Yes, you do not need to apply different formulas depending on the ratio. This one formula can be used everywhere. So a into 1 minus r raised to power n divided by 1 minus r, the sum formula for a GP, this works for any ratio. For any ratio, it will work, okay? It works for any ratio. I will definitely be making duas for everyone. अपने parents को कहें, their duas will have much more significance. Tell your mother to make dua for you and your father to make dua for you. And do things that make them make dua for you more anyway without you asking. Major 24 paper question number paper one question a patent one. Okay, we'll have a look at that. We'll have a look at that. Chale, let me answer some general questions from the stream as well quickly, and then we'll have a look at some specific questions after that. Acha. इंशाल्लाह पेपर नहीं लीक होगा. There's no need to worry about that. अगर होना होता तो अब तक हो चुका होता. तो hopefully it's not happening this time इंशाल्लाह. जो आपके कंट्रोल में है अगेन वो करें. If you have specific questions in mind, you can let me know. अभी हम वो start करेंगे in a few minutes इंशाल्लाह. अगर आपके पास कोई specific questions है वो आप मुझे बता सकते हैं. क्वाड्रेटिक फॉर्मूला के लिए इनपुटिंग वैल्यूज इन द क्वाड्रेटिक फॉर्मूला इज इम्पोर्टेंट. उसके बाद फिर आप फाइनल आंसर लिख सकते हो. अगर उसने क्वेश्चन के अंदर कहा हुआ है दैट दे वांट एन एग्जैक्ट आंसर, if they have asked you for an exact answer, in that case you are not allowed to directly write down the answer after that. You have to show more working. But अगर उसने exact answer नहीं कहा हुआ तो फिर आप डायरेक्टली आंसर लिख सकते हो। ठीक है, क्वाड्रेटिक फॉर्मूला में इनपुट करने के बाद, उससे पहले नहीं। एग्जैक्ट वाले केस के अंदर आपको ज्यादा वर्किंग दिखानी होती है थोड़ी सी। ठीक है। अच्छा, जो लीक की बात करेगा दोबारा उसको मैं ब्लॉक कर दूंगा। जो क्वेश्चन आप आगे कंटिन्यू कर रहे हैं एक्स्ट्रा शीट पे, उस पेपर के उसके जो ओरिजिनल क्वेश्चन की स्पेस है उसमें आपने क्लियरली लिखना है, उसमें आपने क्लियरली लिखना है कि आप एक्स्ट्रा शीट पे कंटिन्यू कर रहे हो, और फिर जो एक्स्ट्रा शीट आप यूज कर रहे हो वहां पे जाके आप लिखोगे उस क्वेश्चन का नंबर और उसका पार्ट नंबर। दैट इज इंपॉर्टेंट। अदरवाइज अगेन, अगर एग्जामिनर को समझ नहीं आए, उसको बहुत एफर्ट करना पड़ी आपका वो सोल्यूशन ढूंढने के लिए, यू विल नॉट गेट मार्क्स फॉर दैट। तो जो क्वेश्चन की स्पेस है आपने वहां पर भी लिखना है दैट यू आर कंटिन्यूइंग दैट द रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्किंग समवेयर एल्स, और उस जिस पेज पे आप कंटिन्यू कर रहे हो वहां पे भी आपने क्लियरली लिखना है कि कौन सा क्वेश्चन है और उसका पार्ट कौन सा है। ठीक है। अच्छा, for differentiation when you apply the power rule, do we have to show the step in which we are multiplying by the number outside? So for example, अगर आपके पास है 6 into 2x plus 5 whole raised to power 7, is it necessary कि पहले आप इसको लिखें 6 into 7 into 2x plus 5 and then whole raised to power 6 and then multiply it by 2? It's not necessary. I generally tend to do that to make sure that the students are understanding the steps that we're doing. But you can jump directly from this to this. 6 times 7, whatever that is, 42. 42 times 2, 42 times 2, and that will give you 84. 84 into 2x plus 5 whole raised to power 6, and that will be the derivative. That's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do that. Okay, you can jump directly from this step to this step. That is allowed. वर्किंग में 4 सिग्निफिकेंट फिगर्स तक आपको लिखना है। 4 सिग्निफिकेंट फिगर्स का भी, उसका भी आपको सोचने की बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत नहीं है। जस्ट राइट अ लॉट ऑफ डेसिमल प्लेसेस इन योर वर्किंग। उससे भी ज्यादा लिखते हैं आप राउंड ऑफ उसको ज्यादा करें नहीं, आप 5-6 डेसिमल्स लिखते हैं। बिल्कुल एंड पर जाके इन द फाइनल रिजल्ट यू शुड राउंड ऑफ। फाइनल रिजल्ट में भी यू शुड राइट द मोर एक्यूरेट नंबर फर्स्ट एंड देन यू राउंड ऑफ दैट एज इन द वेरी लास्ट स्टेप। ठीक है, उससे पहले वर्किंग के अंदर आप ज्यादा सारे डेसिमल्स लिखते रहेंगे। ठीक है, दैट विल हेल्प यू नॉट लूज एनी एक्यूरेसी मार्क्स। ओके, इन्फिनिटी एज अ लिमिटेड इंटीग्रेशन, ये अभी मैं एक वीडियो पोस्ट कर रहा हूँ इन जस्ट 30 मिनट्स। वो उसमें आप देख सकते हैं। इट्स वेरी स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड। आपने बस इन्फिनिटी एज इट इज इनपुट कर देनी है, और जब कांस्टेंट होगा न्यूमरेटर में, डिनोमिनेटर में इन्फिनिटी होगी, वो बस जीरो पे राउंड ऑफ हो वो जीरो आज वो फ्रैक्शन बन जाएगी, और बाकी सब आपने उसी तरह से नॉर्मली सॉल्व कर लेना। ठीक है। ओके, आपके पास एक्स्ट्रा पेजेस ऑलरेडी होते हैं एग्जाम के अंदर। आइडियली आपको उन्हीं में करना चाहिए कंप्लीट। आपके पास एक एडिशनल पेज तो हमेशा होता है, एक एडिशनल पेज हमेशा होता है हर पेपर में। किसी किसी पेपर में 2 एडिशनल पेजेस भी होते हैं, और एक ब्लैंक पेज भी कभी यू ऑल्सो हैव अ ब्लैंक पेज इन द मिडल समटाइम्स। ओके, so you always have at least one additional page in the paper. Sometimes it's 2 additional pages as well, and sometimes there's a blank page in the middle of the paper as well. So if you run out of space on the additional pages at the end, you can use that blank page as well. But if you still need more sheets after that, you are allowed to take extra sheets. It's generally discouraged to do that because there is going to be a relatively higher probability of that extra sheet getting lost. It has happened in the past that some students say that they'd written something on some extra sheet, and that did not get checked since they've started giving scanned copies of the papers now as well. So in case that gets misplaced for some reason, if it's not tied properly, that will be a problem. Otherwise, they will accept that as well. But normally, it's not required that you need even more additional space after the additional pages that are already given in the exam. Blank page pay, of course, you can write on that as well. After writing on the additional pages, if you still need more space. Okay. Just don't write on the sides where they clearly say do not write in this space. Otherwise, you should always do that. Okay. Volume of revolution question sent in the group chat. We'll do that. I'm just answering some general questions first, and then we'll do some specific questions after that. Any specific pattern you should attempt the paper in? I don't generally recommend any specific pattern because different people find different questions easier. So it really depends on you. Some people, they are very strong in quadratics, for example. Some other people, they find quadratics a difficult topic. So it really depends on you. The most important thing is that you do not get stuck at any one particular question. So what I recommend is in the beginning of the paper, take a couple of minutes to go through the whole paper quickly, all 10 to 12 questions, whatever the total number of questions is. So remember the total number of questions there are in the paper. It could be anywhere from 10 to 12. 11 to 12 is more likely in paper one, 11 to 12. Look at what the total number is. So you have that in mind while you're working on the paper and skim through the questions as well. You don't have to read the questions in a lot of detail, but should have some idea of what is coming at the end of the paper because that will also give you a motivation to not get stuck in the middle because sometimes they keep some relatively easier questions at the end as well. So there might be one question at the end that is relatively easier and it has a lot of marks as well. If you end up getting stuck in the middle of the paper and you do not even know there's an easy question coming at the end, you will basically mess up a lot because of that. Because if there's an easy question at the end, and you spend time on a question in the middle of the paper, you would end up making careless mistakes at the end then on that question then that will make you lose marks. So skim through the paper in the beginning first, spend a couple of minutes on that, and then just go in order. Skip any questions that you do not understand any direction for in a couple of minutes. So if you can't figure out in which direction you should go in a particular question in a couple of minutes, you move on to the next question. And then in the second go, then you try to think about the remaining questions. And at the end, make sure any remaining questions that you've got, you try to get as many partial marks in them as possible by, even if you can't solve the whole thing, maybe just a few steps in an identity proving question. For example, if there's a question in which they ask you to prove an identity and you cannot figure out what to do there, a lot of times they have marks for simple things like converting tan theta to sine theta over cos theta, writing sine square theta as 1 minus cos square theta. So if you've done some working at least in those questions, even if you are not able to get the whole question right, you will still get partial marks. So you should do that. Okay, so go in order, whatever the order is, after having skimmed through the paper once in the beginning, and then just make sure not to get stuck in the middle on a particular question. If you do get stuck, leave that part for the end of the paper after that. ठीक है अच्छा inverse reflection of reciprocal graphs. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Inverse reflection? If you feel you're done with everything and do not need any more revision, just it's okay. You should have a good sleep. Make sure that you have already gone through the notes then, right? So that all the details that you need to know about, you know them. If you have done all of that and you have looked at your already attempted past papers as well, especially the questions that you got wrong the first time, that's okay. You can, have a good sleep, relax, and that's okay. So it works differently for everyone. Some people who might still be struggling, they might need to make sure that they revise the notes in the next few hours, making sure that they have all the important details in their active memory. But if you've already done that, then good for you. Have a good sleep, relax, and you'll be fine, inshallah. But make sure that you sleep well. That is very important for a math exam. Otherwise, it just increases the number of careless errors you end up doing in the exam. If you have something like this, f of 5, if you have f of 5, is it okay to evaluate f of 5 separately and then input that in f? Yes, absolutely. That's the better way of doing this anyway. So what you would do would be you can evaluate f of 5 separately if you want, see what value you get from that, and then you just input that in that function, and that will be okay. So you do not have to evaluate the function f of x for this first. It's better to just evaluate f of 5 and then input that in that function, and that will be much more efficient. This is the working that you would show. You would show f of 5 equal to something, and then whatever this number is that you're getting there, you would input that inside brackets there, and then you simplify that further. Okay. Fatima, that's a long question. Can you send me a specific example for that? Can you use In what scenario is b over 2a used, and for what? Minus b over 2a, that is used for finding x coordinate of a quadratic function. That's one of the methods that you've got. So for example, if you have 2x squared minus 6x plus 13, if you have a function like this, and you want to find the turning point of this, for quadratic functions only, you have this formula x equals minus b over 2a to find the turning point. But since you know differentiation as well, you can do it using differentiation as well, and that will be fine. Differentiation is a general method that works for any kind of function. This is specific to quadratic functions. So in this case, you get minus into minus 6 divided by 2 into 2, which is 6 over 4, or 3 over 2. That's the x coordinate. You input this back in the function to get the corresponding y coordinate. You could do differentiation alternatively as well, and that will work fine as well. Okay. Reflection in the line y equals x for reciprocal graphs. Let's suppose you've got a graph like this. How do you reflect it? Let's suppose this is the line y equals x. Let me make it slightly different so it's easier to understand what is happening. Let me make it like this. If I want to make it less steep on one side. Okay, so let's suppose we've got something like this. Okay, something of this form. Okay. Now you want to reflect it in the line y equals x. Now all you have to do is, let's suppose there's an asymptote here going up. Now, if you have a graph like this, it will already be always be given in the question. You're not supposed to be able to sketch graphs of reciprocal functions yourself. That's not required by your syllabus. If you do have to sketch a graph for an inverse function, they will already give you the graph of the original function like this. Now, if you have the original function given that has a graph that looks something like this, all you have to do is take a few points. Take one point here, for instance. Reflect it in the line y equals x and see where that goes. So it will be somewhere around here, maybe, when you reflect that. Okay, it comes here. Similarly, take one point on the other side. You can take this point, for instance, and see where this is going to go after reflection, the same distance on the other side. So maybe somewhere around here. It goes here. This point, that is the point of intersection with the line y equals x, that is going to be the same for both of them. So the inverse graph is also going to pass through this. And then you can make a shape of a curve that, is passing through those points. You had an asymptote that was vertical there. When you reflect it in x-axis, that asymptote is going to become horizontal. So something like this, that's what the graph is going to look like. Make it slightly better. So it will go like this here. And on the downward side, it will become an asymptote like this. So basically, you roughly have to reflect a few points in the line y equals x and then join them using a curve. How would you reflect the points? You don't have to do it very accurately because they will just ask you to sketch the graph. What you would do would be you would place your ruler like this. So let's say you've got a ruler, you place it like this, such that the lines of the ruler, they align with this line y equals x like this. Okay, these lines align with y equals x. And now measure the distance on one side, mark a point at the same distance on the other side. Do it for 3, 4 points, join them, you'll get a curve, and that is all that they want. You don't need a lot of accuracy for such problems. Okay, and that will be acceptable. Do we have to measure out the 45-degree angle for line of reflection? It should look approximately correct. So 45 degrees is a line that is going to pass exactly in the middle of the x-axis and the y-axis. So it should be visible that it is in the middle. It's bisecting x and y axes. As long as visibly it looks like it's almost in the middle, that will be acceptable. And for problems like these where you have a function and the inverse function on the same diagram, you need to make sure you've got the same scale on both axes. That is extremely important. Whatever is 1 unit on horizontal axis, it should be the same on the vertical axis. The scale on both axes must be the same. It should not be different. Okay. Uh, if you want to express this in completed square form, 3x squared plus 24x plus p, and then they ask you to find the values of p for which this equation has no real roots. How do we do it using hence word? Okay. So the question is, if you have a function like this, they ask you to complete the square for this first. Now, how do you complete the square for this? You've got multiple methods for this, right? I'll just use this one, a into x minus h whole square plus k. Let's just input values of h and k in this. How would you do that? You can find the turning point of that function. The value for a is going to be 3. What about h and k? X equals, or h equals minus b over 2a minus 24 over 3 times 2, or 2 times 3. That gives me minus 4. That's the value for h. Input that value of h back in the function, and that gives you 3 into minus 4 whole squared plus 24 into minus 4 plus p. If we did not have p unknown, we could do this directly on our calculator as well, right? But in this case, we can't because p is not known. We can simplify this, get a value of k from this. What's the value of k that we get? 3 into 16 plus 24 into negative 4, and that is negative 48. Now, this is the y coordinate. So the completed square form, therefore, is going to be, I'm sorry, there was a p there as well. I don't know what I wrote that as there. Okay, so we had minus 48 plus p. So k value turns out to be p minus 48. So what's the completed square form going to be then? X minus minus 4, that means x plus 4 whole squared plus p minus 48. So let's suppose you get a form like this when you complete the square. Okay. Now in this form, what you want to do now is, using this form, they are saying, find the set of values of p for which this equation has no real roots. The set of values of p for which this equation has no real roots. Let me write that down here for everyone. Find the values of p for which this equation has no real roots. Now, even if they have mentioned hence, they allow you to do it directly as well. So in problems like these, even if you were to put b square minus 4ac, which equation has no real roots? What's the equation, by the way? Is it 0 on the other side? Which equation are they talking about? Okay, so the equation, so you're saying for which the equation f of x equal to 0, assuming that this is f of x, that has no real roots. Now, you could apply discriminant on this form directly as well, and that's okay. You could say, in this form, put b square minus 4ac less than 0. You'll get an inequality from that, solve that inequality, and that will be allowed in such problems. Okay? But since they have mentioned hence, that means there could be a way of doing it directly from this form as well. And since it's a 1 mark question, this is the way to think about it. It's a quadratic expression. It's a U-shaped curve. It'll look like this. What's the turning point of this curve? Since we have already completed the square, we know the turning point of this function is -4 and p minus 48. Now, if this curve has no point of intersection with the x-axis, if it does not intersect the x-axis, if the x-axis is below this, what does that tell us about the y-coordinate of the minimum point? P minus 48, that should be greater than 0, and that gives us p greater than 48, and that will be the final answer. Y less than 0, it should be greater than 0, right? It's a U-shaped curve. For this curve to not intersect with the x-axis, at the x-axis y is equal to 0, for this to not intersect with the x-axis, this y-coordinate of the minimum point, it has to be above the x-axis, so it should be greater than 0. If it was below the x-axis, then the curve would end up intersecting the x-axis at some point. That's not what we want. We want the curve to not intersect. That is only possible if the minimum point is above the x-axis. Okay? Yeah, so if you were to do it on the original function, you would say b square minus 4ac is less than 0 in that case. But we are not using b square minus 4ac here. That would be an alternative method, right? But we thought of it using the graph here, that the turning point has to be above the x-axis. Okay. Abdullah, if you have just purchased FX991EX, please do not rely on that for tomorrow. You should not use that for tomorrow. You can take that as an extra calculator, but you take the one that you are already used to working on. That will end up making you spend a lot more time on questions. Do not just rely on that new calculator that you have just purchased. The important functions that you will find useful on that calculator, you can search on my channel. Just search for videos titled calculator. You'll find 4 or 5 videos on that. Ignore the ones that uh, are related to statistics. The rest of them you can watch them if you want, but I don't think it's a good idea to do that right now. Even if you learn them right now, you'll end up spending too much time on those things in the exam. It's too late to learn something new at this point. If you just want to use it for the quadratic for the completing square method, just look at look at a short video that I posted, I think 4 or 5 days back, on how to complete the square quickly. You will understand how to use that function from that. So I'll just show that to you right now as well. Menu, go to menu. Down there, you have this equation option. You use the same option to solve quadratic equations as well. You select that, then you go to polynomial, degree 2, input 2 there. You just input the coefficients in this case. Now, we can't do that for this because there's an unknown. But let's suppose p was some number in this case. Let's say x square coefficient is 3, coefficient of x is 24, and the constant term, let's suppose, was 7. Okay. Now, when you input that there, let's suppose it was -7. When you input that there, you get some x-intercepts. You can use this when you're solving a quadratic equation as well, as long as you're showing the step in which you are inputting values in the formula. You get the x-intercepts. When you press equal to button again, you get the x coordinate of the turning point after that. You press the equal to button again, you get the corresponding y coordinate as well. And then you can just input those values in this form and you'll get the completed square form, right? You can have a look at that short video as well to understand that a bit relatively slowly. Nature of the function, what happens for neither? Yeah, give me a question quickly. Give me a question. I'll start solving questions in about 5 minutes now, inshallah. I'll start solving questions in about 5 minutes, inshallah. Columns, people on YouTube, you can just, go back. There's an option इसमें आप वो है नीचे आ रहा होता है, आप पीछे जा सकते हैं वीडियो के ऊपर. So why do you want me to repeat that? आप देख सकते हैं पीछे जाके. Should you have a calculator in degree mode or radian mode for most of the paper? In paper 1, keep it in degrees. Only for the circular measure question, you convert it to radians. But you should make it a habit in general whenever you're using sine, cos, or tan functions. Always look at the top of your calculator and see if it says R or D and whether it's correct for what you want. But in paper 1, you only need radians for circular measure questions or trigonometry questions, right? Trigonometry questions or circular measure questions. Apart from that, it's normally going to be degrees. But still, there is a possibility that they end up asking you for, they end up giving angles in radians in coordinate geometry or an equation of circle question as well. There's always a possibility. So make it a habit to always check, always look at the top of your calculator and see if it says R or D, and make sure that you are using the correct mode based on what they're using in the question. Okay, so you'll always understand whether the question uses angles in degrees or radians, because for degrees they will always have the degree sign. So if they say 180, they will always have a degree sign on top of that. And angles in radians, they do not have the degree sign, and most of the times they will be in terms of pi as well. Okay, but regardless of that, make sure that you have that, that you look at the top of your calculator every time you're using sine, cos, tan. Okay. Area of the triangle using Heron's formula. Why would you want to know that? It's not required by the syllabus. There's always going to be a simpler way of doing that. It's not part of your syllabus. You'll not be required to do that, required to use that. So there's no point. I don't think you should confuse everyone at this point. अच्छा, जब वर्किंग कर रहे होते हैं तो पेज पे लाइन करके दूसरी साइड पे वर्किंग कर सकते हैं. अभी आई जस्ट एक्सप्लेन्ड, as long as it's very clear to the examiner, the flow of your working, in which direction you're going, If you want to do it like this, that you want to make a line in the middle of the paper, when the working is very long, let's say, it should be very easy to follow. It should be very easy to follow. Okay. So you should go in with this direction and then clearly show that you are doing the next step here then. Okay. Should be clear to follow the order of your working. If that is not clear, then that will make you lose marks. Okay. So they discourage, the examiner does discourage that. The reason for that is most candidates, when they do it this way, they make it very confusing and they make it hard to follow the working. So in case that happens to you, you end up losing unnecessary marks. So if you're unsure that you will be able to write very clearly, it's better not to do that. And maybe you can continue on the extra page in that case. That will be safer for you. So it's a decision that you have to make then. It's a decision that you have to make based on how your working generally looks like. ठीक है चलें. The transformation graph question, in which we need to find A, B, and C and find number of solutions. You can look at the trigonometry videos on my channel. Look at P1 crash course. P1 crash course. In that, you'll find trigonometry. Those questions you'll find there. If you have a specific question, you can let me know, because now I'm going to start solving some specific questions. Okay. For general concepts, you have that playlist available. You'll find the concept covered there. Okay. Achha, now let's start with some specific questions. And so those of you who posted any questions earlier, please post them again. Okay, chale. Let's start with this one. June 24, paper 1-1. June 24, paper 1-1. Okay, so you have a question on that. June 24, paper 1-1. This one. Question number? Last question? Okay, that's this one. Can you be specific about the problem that you've got in this? So we have this function. The graph of the function is shown on the diagram. We need to find the set of values of x for which f of x is decreasing. Now, what does that mean? If a function is decreasing, what that means is the derivative of the function, it has to be less than 0. So what we do is we differentiate the function, put that less than 0. That gives us an inequality, and we solve that inequality to find the solution. How do we solve inequalities in general? We treat them as equations first of all, solve the equation, find the critical values, and then for a quadratic inequality, you can use the curve or just the calculator directly after this step and write down the answer. Which part specifically, Aman? Which part?
सर इसके सेकंड पार्ट में आई हैड अ क्वेश्चन कि जो नॉर्मल का ग्रेडियंट है और जो टेंजेंट का ग्रेडियंट है दे आर बोथ नेगेटिव रेसिप्रोकल्स सो दैट मीन्स दे आर इंटरसेक्टिंग एट 90 डिग्रीज
Yes.
बट द हाइट वी टुक वो काफ़ी डिफरेंट है बिकॉज इफ इट्स अ 90 डिग्री ट्रायंगल वी कैन जस्ट टेक वन ऑफ द साइड्स एज द हाइट बट वी टुक एन इंटरसेक्टिंग लाइन जो आपने ड्रॉ भी की हुई है वी
Okay.
टुक दैट एज द हाइट आई वाज जस्ट कंफ्यूज अबाउट दैट
Let me look at the question. Acha, in the second part, they're saying a triangle is bounded by the y-axis, then normal to the curve at the point where x is equal to 1, and the tangent to the curve at the point where x is equal to -1. Normal is at a different point, tangent is as a different point. One is at x equals -1, the other is at x equals 1.
हाँ
They
जी
are at
सर, the gradients, if you see the working of the question, normal का gradient और tangent का gradient, they're both negative reciprocals.
okay. Chale, let me see.
Yes.
We had the function given. We had the function given. We found the derivative of that. Normal at x equals 1. That turned out to be this. And then the tangent at x, tangent at that other point, that turned out to be negative 9. Yeah, that's okay. So we've got a tangent and a normal, and they're also perpendicular to each other, even though they are at different points. So that's correct. Then they asked us to find the area of that triangle, which they make with the y-axis. Okay, all right. Now what I did here was I found the equations of the tangents because we have to find the y-intercepts. So we found the equations, we found the y-intercepts, and the y-intercepts turned out to be 26 over 9 minus 8. And we got a triangle that looked like this. Now this is a triangle. Now you're right that this angle will also be 90 degrees. But if this is 90 degrees and you want to use this side and this side, if you want to use these two sides, you would have to use distance formula. Do you know the point of intersection? Do we have that anywhere? Did we find that? Yeah, we solved them simultaneously to find the point of intersection as well. Did we? Can you spot the point of intersection somewhere?
Here x equals to negative 49 over 41 is
Yeah,
basically last line.
this. Okay, so you have the point of intersection's x coordinate. You can find the corresponding y coordinate as well. You will get this particular point. Let's call this something x. You will have to find the distance of x from this point and the distance of x from this point. You can find those two distances and then use one of these sides as the base and the other as the height. That will work. You'll get the same result from that as well. What I have done here is I've taken some other sides as base and height because they were slightly more efficient in this case, I thought. Since we already have the y-intercepts, we've got this point here and this point here. This is the y-axis, this yellow line that I've shown here. So this is a vertical line. This line is vertical. If I take this yellow side as the base of the triangle, what is the base going to be? 26 over 9 minus this number, which is 98 over 9. That's the base of the triangle. I've taken this side as the base. And then height is supposed to be perpendicular to that. So for height, I have taken this side, this length then, perpendicular to the third point. Now, what is the length of this side going to be? We know that this is x equal to 0 and this is x equal to negative 49 over 41. So we could say the height of the triangle will be 49 over 41 if we consider this as the base. So I've again used half into base into height. This way we don't have to use distance formula to find this length and this length. And we can do it directly like this. Does that make sense?
So sir, even if we have a 90-degree angle, we can use uh, a new line to make, मतलब हमें perpendicular use करने की जरूरत नहीं है for the height. We can make a new line
No,
और उसको
height is always perpendicular. Height is always perpendicular, but for any triangle, you can take any of the three sides as the base. So if I have a random triangle like this, for instance, I can take this side as the base. In that case, the height will be this perpendicular. I can take this side as the base. In that case, the height is going to be this perpendicular. Or I can choose the other side as the base, this side. In that case, the height will be this perpendicular. So whichever side you take as the base, height is supposed to be perpendicular to that. Even if it's a right angle triangle, if you have a right angle triangle like this, If you say this is the base, then this would be the height, yes. But what if I say the hypotenuse is the base? Because I know that's that side. If I know the hypotenuse and I also know the perpendicular length from the hypotenuse to this third point, I could say this is the base and this is the height. That will also work. So any of the three sides of a triangle can be taken as the base, but then the height has to be perpendicular coming from the third point to that base. Is that okay? Acha, let me look at some other questions now. Okay, I'm just removing some comments from there. Let me copy this question from the group chat. What was the question about? What was the question about? The volume of revolution question that Usman posted? Okay, let's do this. All right, so let's have a look at this question. This requires an exact volume of revolution. Okay, so it says the diagram shows part of the curve with this equation and the lines x equals 2.4 and y equals 1. The curve intersects the line y equals 1 at the point 1, 1. Find the exact volume of the solid generated when the shaded region is rotated 360 degrees about the x-axis. It's rotated about x-axis, right? Now, we want to find the volume of revolution about x-axis. The formula for that is pi into integration of y squared with respect to x. Limits are going to be values of x. In this case, the limits are from 1 to 2.4. These will be the limits that you take. Now, the curve's equation is given. This is 5x minus 4 whole raised to power negative 1 over 3. And the line's equation is y equal to 1. Now, this area is between these two graphs. The area is between these two graphs. If we just find the volume of revolution from this curve, that will give us the volume when this area is rotated about x-axis. That is not what the question is asking about. The question is asking about the volume when the shaded region is rotated. Now, this is between two graphs. One graph is y equal to 1. What we can do is we can find the volume of revolution for the area between that y equals 1 line and the x-axis. Let's rotate this area first. How would we do that? We can say the function is y equal to 1. And the other function, that is y equal to 5x minus 4 power negative 1 over 3. We will rotate the area under the curve as well. And then we will find the difference between them. So just apply the volume of revolution formula on both of them. Now remember, for the formula, we need y squared. If y is equal to 1, what about y squared? Y squared is going to be 1. Now, this is another example of where we are kind of working in columns, but it's perfectly okay because it's clear that the flow of the working is like this, that we are finding this volume here and this volume here. So it's very easy to follow. Okay? There's no jumping around from this side to that side or that side to this side. Because if you don't even do this, then a lot of questions you will not be able to complete in the space that is provided. And you'll have to take a lot of additional pages. That's not recommended as well. Okay, so as long as it's very easy to follow what you're doing, it is okay. Acha. Y squared is 1. In this case, y squared turns out to be, when we square both sides, when we square the side here, what do we get from that? 5x minus 4 raised to power negative 2 over 3. Apply the volume of revolution formula on both of them. If we apply that on 1, what does that give us? Pi into integration of 1 with respect to x. Limits are from 1 to 2.4. Integration of 1 is x, so we get pi into integration of x from 1 to 2.4. You will solve this. This will give you pi into 2.4 minus 1, which simplifies to 1.4 times pi. This is the volume of revolution that we're getting for the area under the line. Then we do the same thing for the curve as well. That gives us pi into integration of 5x minus 4 whole raised to power negative 2 over 3 with respect to x. Limits are from 1 to 2.4. Integrate input limits and you get 5x minus 4 whole raised to power minus 2 over 3 plus 1, that will be 1 over 3. Divide by that new power. Also divide by the derivative of this thing, which is going to be 5. Input limits from 1 to 2.4. You'll input limits. You have to show that working where you are inputting limits. And since they want an exact answer here, you'll have to work with exact numbers. Do not use an irrational number in your calculation. Um, as in, do not convert an irrational number to decimals or even a recurring decimal to decimals. You'll find some value from here. Find the difference between them, and that will give you the result. Do you want me to solve this further, or you just wanted to ask about how to structure the question? Do you want me to complete this working, or is it okay? You can complete this afterwards. Yes, so you'll find this volume, you already have the other volume, you'll just find their difference at the end. So let's call this V2, let's call this V1. The required volume at the end is going to be V1 minus V2. Just find their difference. You want to ask about the marking scheme? What do they say in the marking scheme? They're using cylinder. That's okay as well. That is okay as well. What they are doing is they're saying when this area is rotated, you would end up with a cylinder like this. So you can use the volume of cylinder formula as well. That will be an alternative to this working that we're doing here. But most students, they find it difficult to visualize how the shape is going to look like when you rotate it like this. So I think it's easier to just use integration. But if you are comfortable with this cylinder thing, you can also do that. That's also fine. That will also be correct. But it's not required. It's not required. Integration will work for you. Yes, for the line, you could use the cylinder formula. If you're able to visualize that, that's great. You can do that. Otherwise, just use the line. Circle integration से area कैसे निकालेंगे? You can find you'll find volume questions involving circle equations, but for area, you will need the graph given as well because otherwise you end up with plus minus there. That is going to be a bit confusing. But in volume questions, sometimes they do give circle equations as well. The question that you sent above. Uh, Circular measure question. Okay, I actually just solved it in the morning as well with with another class. Let me see if I can find that there. It was with these guys, I think. Yeah. Okay, what part of this question? Which part of this question? All parts or any specific part? You did not even try? Seriously? एग्जाम से पिछली रात तो ऐसे नहीं होना चाहिए ना कि आपने ट्राई नहीं किया. Everyone said it's difficult, so you thought not to try. अच्छा. Okay, let me explain. What I'll do is I'll just copy this here on the side. Acha. In the first part they say find this angle here. This is a one-off question वैसे. I'm not even sure if it's a good idea to spend time on this at this point because I mean it's a very specific shape. You're unlikely to get the same shape again in the exam. So whatever we do for this, it's not something that will probably help you with other questions. But the first part is the only one that's, I think, a bit more tricky in this question. So what I'll do is I'll explain. Yeah, I'll quickly explain this to you then. Acha dekhiye. We need to find this particular angle here, okay? They want us to show that this is pi over 3. Now, how do you do that? We've got some straight lines. This is a straight line, this is a straight line, this is a straight line, this is a straight line. And then we've got some arcs. These are arcs. Okay. Now, one way to approach this is that we join A and F like this. Now, remember, AP is radius. This line is a tangent. The straight lines coming, they are tangents to the circles, which means we are going to have a 90 degrees here or pi over 2 radians. Similarly, if I were to make a radius from point F to this side as well, that will also be going to make a 90 degrees. Now, these two sides are going to be equal to each other. What are these sides' lengths? Radius is given to be 20. So this complete length is therefore 40. So this is 40 units. The opposite side is also 40 units. It's a rectangle. So this angle and this angle are also going to be pi over 2. Pi over 2, yeah. So at the point A, we got this angle that this should be pi over 2. And this angle should be pi over 2. Now, similarly, on the other side as well, we could make another rectangle. This angle here is also pi over 2. Okay. The idea is if you can find the rest of the angles, these angles, then you can just subtract them from 2 pi to get this angle theta. So we have found two of the other angles. This is pi over 2, this is pi over 2. Then you've got this middle circle. You could join A with this center like this, and you get these triangles here. These are equilateral triangles. How do we know that? Because all sides are equal. This side is 40, this side is 40, this side is 40, because there are two radii, right? All of the sides are 40. That means these are equilateral triangles. And if these are equilateral triangles, this angle here is going to be pi over 3. And this angle here is also going to be pi over 3. So what we can do is we can subtract from 2 pi those remaining angles, pi over 2 minus pi over 2 minus pi over 3. minus pi over 3, and that gives us pi over 3. That's the angle theta that we were looking for. Make sense? Is that okay? Okay, that's one way of doing this. Find the length of the rope. Length of the rope has different parts. Some are arcs, some are straight lines. Okay, we've got some arcs and some straight lines. What you would do would be, you would say this is a straight line that has a length of 40. This is 40, this is 40, this is 40, this is 40, and this is also 40. 6 into 40, that will give you the straight parts. Then you've got some arcs. You'll find one arc length, multiply that by 6 as well. Yes, find one arc length, multiply by 6, and then 40 into 6, add them up together, you'll get the total length of the rope. That is what I've done here. One arc, that is 20 pi over 3, and then the length of the rope is going to be 6 times that plus 6 times 40. So that's straightforward. Then they're saying find the area of the hexagon ABCDEF. Hexagon is this yellow region that you see there, the yellow region. How can you find the area of this yellow region? It's a regular hexagon. You can break this hexagon into 6. You can divide it into 6 equilateral triangles. Yeah. Find area of one triangle, half AB sine C. You know the sides, 40, 40. You know the angle between them, pi over 3. Multiply that by 6. And then you have to find the total area of the complete region. The complete region. Now, hexagon you've already found. You're left with some rectangles, 6 rectangles, and 6 sectors. Find the area of one sector, find the area of one rectangle. One sector or one rectangle, multiply them by 6, add all of them up, you'll get the result. So this is what you get for the rest of the parts. Okay, it's quite some working, but the rest is fairly straightforward. Only the first part was a bit tricky. Yeah, apart from the first part, the rest is not that tricky. Yeah, so question dekar darna nahi hai. When you actually start doing something, it becomes relatively easier. So a lot of students would have lost marks in this question. Why? It's the last question in the paper. Many people would not have reached this point. Now, even students who reached this point, they would have spent a lot of time on the first part, struggled in that because that is a bit tricky. It's quite tricky, the first part. And then they would have left the whole remaining question. The reason they did not ask you to find PAQ and instead they're saying show that PAQ is pi over 3 because the examiner also acknowledges this is a relatively tricky part. So if you are not able to do it, the examiner still wants you to attempt the rest of the parts based on that. So if you know this angle is pi over 3, you can just take that value, use that in the next parts. And the next parts are easy marks. You see, this is 4 marks. Just had to do this. Then you have 5 more marks after that. So don't just leave whole questions in the middle of the paper as well. If there's one part that is very difficult, it is very much possible that the next parts might be relatively easier. It happens in paper 3 all the time, and a lot of times in paper 1 as well, that they give a difficult first part and then the rest of the parts are relatively easier. Okay? जी देख के नहीं डरना सिर्फ ठीक है देख कर नहीं डरना ट्राई करना है so the first time you attempt a question if you cannot figure that out move on com- complete all the questions that you are able to figure out. Then in the next attempt, you do as much as possible on the remaining questions. Now, for some people, it might be that they're able to do 9 questions in the first attempt. For others, it might be that they're able to do 6, 7 questions in the first attempt. You need to make sure that you get those questions correct, first of all. So the questions that you know about, you're done with them and there's no chance that you would run out of time on those questions that you knew how to do very easily. And then in the next go, you will look at the questions that you were not able to figure out on the first attempt. Do not spend too much time in the middle. Which volume formula should we know? Uh, Only for prism. and cylinder. The rest are all given. Prism, cylinder, those are the ones that examiner expects you to know about. And of course, the other integration formulas, volume of revolution, formula in integration, area between a graph and x-axis, area between graph and y-axis, they are also not given. You need to remember them. So everything that's not there in the formula sheet, you of course need to remember that. Do familiarize yourself with the formula sheet beforehand as well, so you know what to find where. Although in paper one, you don't need to use that a lot. Most of the information is on the first page that you want to use anywhere. APGP formulas are on the first page here. Notice that in place of TN, they use UN. So that's just the term number. You've got the mensuration formulas here. The next page is, I would assume that you have memorized these identities already. There are only two that you need to know from trigonometry. There's only one differentiation rule that you need to know of. So again, you don't need a formula sheet for that. Only one integration rule that you need to know of. Again, you should not need to use the formula sheet for that. So only the first page is what is going to be relevant for you mostly. So anything and everything that is not there on this first page, you need to remember that. You need to memorize that. How much time should you spend building up the schema work for each question? You mean planning for each question? It really depends on the question. For the bigger questions, you may take maybe up to a minute. For shorter questions, schema work, what do you mean by that? Do you mean planning for that question, or do you mean the complete working for that question? Is that what you're saying? I think you're saying planning for that question, right? So if it's a bigger question, maybe 1.5 minute. That is what you should, spend initially. And if you can't figure it out, maybe 2 minutes. And if you cannot figure out in 2 minutes any direction for the question, as in which direction you should go in, it's a good idea in the first go that you skip that part. Move on, come back to that later. You can always come back later. But for shorter questions, you can, just start in about 15 to 20 seconds as well. In what order do we write the following transformation? This transformation. Okay, if I've missed a question above, please post them again. It's not pre-recorded. F of 2x plus 6. F of 2x plus 6. इसको हम कैसे लिखेंगे? F of 2x plus 6. What's the order of transformations going to be? This is horizontal transformations, right? Horizontal transformations. What's the order in horizontal transformations? हम BODMAS का उल्टा करते हैं, right? Opposite of BODMAS. What does BODMAS say? BODMAS says we should be, तो x के साथ BODMAS क्या कहेगा? We should multiply 2 first and then add 6. हमने उल्टा करना है उसका, तो हम ये 6 पहले करेंगे. That means it's a translation. Minus 6, 0. And then we do stretch, which is going to be a horizontal stretch by scale factor 1/2. That will be the order. Okay. Do not spend too much time planning the order in which you're going to do the paper. There's no need to do that. Skim through the paper in the beginning and then just go in the order of the question paper. Just go in that order, but be very generous about skipping questions. If you can't figure something out relatively quickly, move on. That's the important thing. Okay. If you take 2 common in this, so if you say f of 2, if it was like this, f of 2 into x plus 3, now it will become 3, right? Now, if you take 2 common, again, this is horizontal. You go opposite to BODMAS. What does BODMAS say? This is X, right? BODMAS says we should evaluate the brackets first, right? B brackets. We should evaluate the brackets first. We don't do that because we have to do opposite to that. So in this case, we would say it's a horizontal stretch. It's still happening inside the function with X. It's a horizontal stretch. Scale factor 1 over 2. But then the translation that we write, that is going to be minus 30. That's also fine. Okay. Can't we say pi over 2? Pi over 2 where? Extra sheets are available if you run out of additional pages that are already given with the paper. Transformations are actually not difficult. Some trigonometric transformations, they do become difficult sometimes, but if it's a normal function transformation, is actually a relatively easier question once you've practiced many of them. Yeah, tan वगैरह graphs, they do become a bit difficult, yes. Yeah, if you do not take common, I showed you above, this is what happens. Translation first in that case, and then horizontal stretch. Allah Hafiz, all the best, inshallah. It'll be good for all of you. I'll be making du'as as well. You should be making du'as yourself as well, and ask your parents to make du'as for you as well. Inshallah, अच्छा होएगा. अच्छा, सर्कल इंटीग्रेशन का कोई पूछ रहा था. सर्कल इंटीग्रेशन. Uh, I feel like I've seen something like that in some past paper. I'll have to search for that. I have to search for that. Just give me a minute. P1. P1 is past papers. Oops. Yeah, this is one. This is that example. जल्दी मिल गया है तो काफी. This is an example of volume of revolution with a circle equation. We have the circle equation given x square plus y square equal to 2. This is from November 22, paper 1-3. November 22, paper 1-3. Now, you are given the circle equation. X squared plus y squared equals 2. That's the circle equation. What I'll do is I'll just copy this there. अच्छा देखें, आपके पास ये क्वेश्चन है. You have a circle equation x squared plus y squared equals 2 and a line which is y equals 2x minus 1. Point D is such that AD is perpendicular to the x-axis. So AD is vertical line. ये line जो है वो vertical है. Volume of revolution find करना है हमें when the shaded region is rotated through 360 degrees about x-axis. Now it will work the normal way. There's nothing complicated about it. Volume of revolution about x-axis. The formula for that is pi into integration of y squared with respect to x. Now the function is going to be y squared equals 2 minus x squared. You just input that here, 2 minus x squared. And now the only problem is you have to find the limits for this. What are the limits going to be? This is origin. The equation is x squared plus y squared equal to 2. What's the radius going to be? Radius is going to be square root of 2, right? Square root of this number. That means this point here is square root of 2. So your upper limit is going to be square root of 2. What about the lower limit? That will be the point where this line intersects the circle. You would have found that in the first part already. Right? In the first part, they made you find this, the coordinates of A. So whatever the coordinates of A are, how would you find them? You'll just, input y equals 2x minus 1 inside this function. So something like this. Y squared is equal to 2 minus x squared. That's what the equation was, right? You input this in this, you get 2x minus 1 whole squared equals 2 minus x squared. 4x squared minus 4x plus 1 minus 2 plus x squared equal to 0. And that gives you 5x squared minus 4x minus 1 equal to 0. Now, since they want an exact answer at the end, you would have to find uh, the exact value of x from this. It looks like it is going to be 1, right? You solve this, you'll get one solution which is x equal to 1. And the other will be something else, which will be on the other side, I think. No, uh, that is this one. That's not what we need. We need this one, the positive one. It'll turn out to be 1, so this point is going to be 1. You just integrate, input those limits, just keep it in exact form. So it works like any other function. Okay? Makes sense, right? Okay, you can do it after this. You can find the volume after this, right? Allah Hafiz. You're welcome. All the best for your exam, inshallah. Yeah, you still want me to do that question? The one that you posted, increasing, decreasing function, wala? Should you study tomorrow, and how much time should you study? Uh, just make sure that you are relaxed before the exam and have a good night's sleep. That is important. If you don't have night sleep, if you have night sleep, make sure to sleep around 4 hours right now before Fajr, and then maybe a couple of hours nap after that. That is one idea. Or if you want to stay up for now, and you generally do not sleep early at night, then you can keep studying, sleep after Fajr, and then have a good 6, 7 hours of sleep at least. That is important. But then how much should you study? That depends on your current level of preparation. If you've revised the notes already and you have gone through the work that you've already done before, especially the questions that you got wrong the first time, then it's okay. You can relax. But if you're still struggling, maybe it's a good idea to still make effort in the remaining time that you've got and try to improve your concepts as much as possible. Do not do a lot of practice right now, but at least go through the notes in detail and the problems that you've already done before. Go through them in detail. Acha. When it is increasing, when decreasing, and when neither. Acha, let me open that question. For quadratic functions, we could make some cases that when it would be increasing or when decreasing or neither, when the derivative is quadratic. But if the derivative is not quadratic, then it varies from question to question. You have to, make your judgment based on the question itself. So in the example that you have sent, you have g of x equal to minus into 3x plus 1 whole raised to power negative 1 plus 3x. Have I copied this correctly? Because it's not very clear. X greater than or equal to 0. Is this the function? Minus into 3x plus 1 from on my screen. I don't know why it's a bit blurred for some reason. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Achha. Now, we need to figure out whether this function is increasing or decreasing or neither of the two. What you do in such problems is you find the derivative first of all, see what that turns out to be. Minus into minus 1, that will give you 1 into 3x plus 1 whole raised to power negative 2 multiplied by the derivative of what is inside, which is 3. Plus derivative of 3x, that is going to be 3. Simplify this and that gives you 3 over 3x plus 1 whole squared plus 3. That's the derivative. Okay. Now we need to figure out if this function is increasing or decreasing or neither. Now you see 3 is a positive number. 3 is a positive number. Now you have to make judgment based on the derivative that you're getting. Now looking at this, can you say anything about each term, whether that's going to be positive or negative? So look at the second term. That's plus 3, right? That's a positive number. So you would say this term is positive. What about the first term? Numerator is a positive number. Denominator has a square on it. So we have positive number in the numerator. Denominator is a square. A square can never be negative. Since a square can never be negative, the denominator is also going to be positive. It could equal 0, yes, but if it's equal to 0, then the derivative is going to become undefined. So for that reason, it can't be 0 as well. So that tells us that all of these terms are positive. If all of these terms are positive, then the whole thing is positive, and that means it's an increasing function. No matter what the value of x is, it is going to be an increasing function. If, let's suppose, in the derivative, we had an x here as well, what would you say in that case? Still, it would always be positive because of the condition that is given in the question, x greater than or equal to 0. X cannot be negative. That means still this term, it could be equal to 0, yes, but it would not be negative. But if that condition was not given, if the domain was not restricted to x greater than equal to 0, in that case, you could say this is neither then. If there was no condition in x, you would say this is neither. Why? Because depending on the value of x, this whole expression could be negative, it could be positive as well. So it's something that you'll have to think based on that particular function that you're given, but that's the way you think about it. When the derivative is quadratic, for quadratic functions, you should always convert them to completed square form. Always convert them to completed square form, because from that form then you'll be able to understand, okay, what this term is going to be, because x will be inside the square then. So you could say this term is positive if a is positive, if this term is negative if a is negative. So it just depends on the number outside then what this term is going to be. And the constant outside as well, you can say whether that's positive or negative. So it will be easy to figure out if you have a completed square form from that, whether it's positive or negative. For non-quadratic derivatives, this is a similar idea that we use every time. So we think about every term individually and think about whether they're going to be positive or negative. Okay? For quadratic, you convert them to completed square form and then think based on that. Okay, you're welcome. How do you find exact angles? From your calculator directly? If you're talking about sine 45, sine 30, sine 60, you should have a calculator that can give you those values. But if you're asking about something else, you can let me know. Any resources through which you can improve at this point? Revision videos, do make use of them. Allah Hafiz, Yahya, Aman. I'll see you again, inshallah, in the other papers. All the best. Inshallah, अच्छा आएगा. Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz to everyone else who's leaving as well. Uh, I'll be looking at some YouTube chat now. Any resources that you can use to improve? You can use the revision videos that I've posted. Uh, have a look at that. Differentiation volume questions. Differentiation, you mean differentiation and volume questions? Or are you talking about rate of change questions? If that's the only thing that you're struggling with, maybe have a look at the crash course video on that and do some practice questions from a topical book. So let me look at some other questions in the chat. पेपर टाइम पे नहीं हो रहा. P1 में तो इतना वैसे टाइम का मसला होना चाहिए नहीं. दैट कम्स विद प्रैक्टिस, राइट? सो प्रैक्टिस जितनी ज़्यादा करते हैं उतना आपका टाइम मैनेजमेंट उतनी आपकी बेहतर होती है. अब तो खैर इट्स वी डोंट हैव इनफ टाइम लेफ्ट नाउ टू डू मोर प्रैक्टिस, बट एग्जाम में बस आपने ये करने के दरमियान में स्टक नहीं होना किसी क्वेश्चन के ऊपर. दैट इज इम्पॉर्टेंट. If you take care of that, should be fine, inshallah. If anyone has any specific questions, you can let me know. जनरल क्वेश्चंस, कॉन्सेप्ट्स अगर आपको सिर्फ करने हैं तो वो आप P1 क्रैश कोर्स प्लेलिस्ट देख सकते हैं. उसमें you'll find the concepts covered. I can answer specific questions if anyone has at this point. हॉरिजॉन्टल ट्रांसलेशन में स्केल फैक्टर, ट्रांसलेशन का तो कोई स्केल फैक्टर नहीं होता. आई थिंक यू प्रॉब्ली मेंट ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन. हॉरिजॉन्टल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन में जब स्ट्रेच होती है तो उसका स्केल फैक्टर रेसिप्रोकल होता है. जो नंबर मल्टीप्लाई हो रहा होता है उसका, बिल्कुल ऐसे ही है. जो नंबर मल्टीप्लाई हो रहा होता है उसका रेसिप्रोकल होता है. इन्फिनिटी वाली इंटीग्रल जो है वो इस तरह से डील करते हैं. जब भी आपके पास कांस्टेंट ओवर इन्फिनिटी आ जाए, कांस्टेंट ओवर इन्फिनिटी आ जाए तो वो फ्रैक्शन जीरो बन जाती है. ठीक है, एक्स्ट्रा शीट्स मिल जाती हैं आपको, बट एडिशनल पेजेस नॉर्मली काफ़ी होते हैं. एडिशनल पेजेस जो दिए होते हैं दे आर जनरली सफिशिएंट. सो -b/2a क्या ज़रूरी है? क्वाड्रेटिक फंक्शंस के लिए हम यूज़ करते हैं -b/2a. लेकिन उसके बगैर भी आप कर सकते हैं. आप डिफरेंशिएशन से भी कर सकते हैं. आप डिफरेंशिएशन से भी कर सकते हैं. So it's not required by the syllabus necessarily. Okay. अगर एक पार्ट में आंसर नहीं आ रहा तो नेक्स्ट पार्ट में कोई रैंडम वैल्यू डाल के आप कर सकते हैं. कर लें, उसके मेथड मार्क्स आपको मिल जाएंगे. मेथड मार्क्स मिल जाएंगे, लेकिन रैंडम वैल्यू भी जो है थोड़ी रीजनेबल होनी चाहिए. आ, मतलब उसकी सेंस बननी चाहिए. देन इट्स ओके. और अगर अगर वो क्वेश्चन के डिफिकल्टी लेवल को बहुत ज़्यादा ऑल्टर नहीं कर देता वो, तो यू गेट मेथड मार्क्स फॉर दैट एटलीस्ट. यस, आंसर मार्क तो नेक्स्ट पार्ट में भी नहीं मिलता फिर. ईसीएफ इतना नहीं मिलता, लेकिन मेथड मार्क्स आपको मिल जाते हैं. ठीक है. एफ स्क्वायर ऑफ एक्स, एफ स्क्वायर ऑफ एक्स, एफ एक्स, एफ ऑफ एक्स हो जाता है ना, एफ स्क्वायर ऑफ एक्स। कॉम्पोजिट फंक्शन। Okay, so if we have f square of x, we can write that as f of x, right? तो फंक्शन f के अंदर आपने f इनपुट करना है, वही फंक्शन उसके अंदर इनपुट कर देना है, and that will give you the result sign. That's what f square of x means. If we have equations of diagonals and one vertex, how to find? If you have one vertex given, तो आप square के बाकी vertices कैसे figure out कर सकते हैं? Can you tell me the specific question number? Specific question number, but question आप बता दें. I'll copy that here. You're welcome, Faizan. जज़ाकल्लाह खैर, दुआओं में याद रखें. I hope you do well, inshallah. इंक्रीजिंग फंक्शन का मतलब होता है डेरिवेटिव पॉजिटिव है, डिक्रीजिंग फंक्शंस का मतलब होता है डेरिवेटिव नेगेटिव है. अब देयर आर टू टाइप्स ऑफ क्वेश्चंस दैट यू गेट. एक वो होते हैं जहाँ पे आपको वो कहता है फाइंड द सेट ऑफ वैल्यूज ऑफ एक्स फॉर विच find the set of values of x for which function is increasing or decreasing. और दूसरा होता है कि आपने शो करना होता है that a function is always increasing or always decreasing. वो दोनों अगर आपको समझने हैं, you can have a look at this. ये P1 क्रैश कोर्स की प्लेलिस्ट है, आप सर्च भी करेंगे तो आपको मिल जाएगी. You can have a look at that particular video for increasing and decreasing functions है. यहाँ पर differentiation में होगी वो differentiation. Increasing decreasing functions, ये पार्ट थ्री में आप देख सकते हैं डिफरेंशिएशन. ओके, आई एम सॉरी, समथिंग happened there. डिफरेंशिएशन में आप देख सकते हैं डिफरेंशिएशन का पार्ट 3, और इसका कुछ आई थिंक शायद एग्जांपल्स जो हैं वो पार्ट 4 में भी किए हैं बाद में. So you can have a look at this video. Just search for this. We'll find it there. Okay. Do I teach O levels and IGCSE? I do, but ज़्यादा जो है, I focus on A levels, but I will be teaching IGCSE O levels from next year onwards a bit more than inshallah. I will be solving some yearly past papers over the next couple of days. I plan to. Hopefully, if I get time, inshallah. But abhi tak I've not been teaching very frequently. अहमद काशिफ, आप रात के इस टाइम पे पेपर लीक जो है वो ढूंढ रहे हैं. पेपर लीक हुआ इस दफ़ा? Hopefully not. I haven't heard any credible reports until now at least. इंशाल्लाह नहीं होगा. Yeah, that can happen. That you end up making careless mistakes by the time you reach seventh, eighth question because you're tired at that point. So उस time के ऊपर you have to be a bit more careful. Now, if you get tired by the point you reach question number 6, 7, I think it's a good idea to maybe take a 30 seconds, a 1 minute break, breathe properly, do some deep breathing, and then do a relatively easier question. Look at the rest of the questions, do a relatively easier question. So you get going again, and then do the more difficult questions after that. But it's important to take maybe a few seconds break or a minute break when that starts happening, when you feel very tired, because that will refresh you a bit and decrease the probability of making a lot of careless errors from there onwards. I'm just answering random questions, nothing specific. हम्म, अच्छा एक दो क्वेश्चंस जो है. थैंक यू अहमद सर. अच्छा, there are two questions that were posted above. November 22 paper 1-3 question number 4. I'll show you the solution for that quickly. I'm also a bit tired now. Let me show you the solution. What was the question number? November 22 paper 1-3. November 22 paper 1-3 question number 4. Okay, this question. Isn't that fairly straightforward? I think the only complication here is, which is easy to miss, because it does not happen a lot in A levels, uh, is the units. So they give you a function in which the units are meters and meter cube for length and volume. They give you this volume function, rate of water being pumped, rate of change of volume, that is given in meter cube per hour. But then the final result that they want from you is in centimeters per minute. Now, since every other information is in meter and hour, you'll just work in meters and hours like you normally do. You have dv over dt given. You differentiate the function to find dv over dx. At that particular point, when the value for when the value for x is 4, you get that value of dv over dx. Use the chain rule, you get a result from that. In this case, that result turns out to be 1 over 25. Now, in most questions, you would just leave it at that. But in this case, there's a problem with units. They expected the answer to be in centimeter per minute. So you'll change it to centimeter per minute. 1 meter has 100 centimeters. So you can multiply by 100 for that reason. Okay. And then 1 hour has how many minutes? 60 minutes. You divide by 60 for that reason. All right. I'm sorry. This was your original answer, 0.144, not just this, 1 over 25. So this is your answer in meters per hour, which is 0.144. At the end, to convert meter per hour to centimeter per minute, you multiply by 100 and divide by 60. That will convert it to centimeter per minute. Okay. For specific concepts, you have the crash course playlist available. Crash course playlist, उसमें आप वो देख सकते हैं domain and range of trigonometric graphs. आप functions वाली P1 की playlist देखें, उसमें आपको मिल जाएगा functions के अंदर भी और trigonometry वाले questions के अंदर भी. You can have a look at that. I am only answering some specific questions right now. June 25, paper 1-5. अच्छा, let me open that as well for you. June 25. June 25, paper 1-5. Paper 1-5, question number 7, part B. Acha, so you're given a parallelogram ABCD, जिसमें A और B के coordinates हैं 3, 7 and 6P. फर्स्ट पार्ट में उसने आपसे P की वैल्यू निकलवा ली है, तो उसमें आप कह रहे हैं कोई मसला नहीं है, आपने P की वैल्यू निकाल ली gradient formula यूज करके. Then in the next part, they're saying find the coordinates of C. That's a standard question. When you have 3 points given in a parallelogram. So ABCD is a parallelogram. You're given A, you're given B, you're given D. आप इसको एक random parallelogram बना लें. So let's suppose this is A, this is B, this is C, and this is D. C is missing. तो आप ये वेक्टर मेथड से ऐसे कर सकते हो, जितने यूनिट्स आपको ए से बी पे जाना है, -2 यूनिट्स एक्स डायरेक्शन में, -2 ही वाई डायरेक्शन में, उतने ही यूनिट्स आपको डी पे सी पे जाने के लिए चाहिए होंगे, -2 एक्स डायरेक्शन में, -2 वाई डायरेक्शन में। सो 6। अच्छा, यहाँ पे मैंने दूसरे दूसरे कोई और पॉइंट से किया हुआ है, मैंने ए और डी से किया हुआ है। सो या तो आप ये कर लें, जितना ए से बी जा रहे हैं उतना ही आप डी से सी पे चले जाएं, दैट इज़ वन आइडिया। मैंने यहाँ पे किया हुआ है कि जितना आप ए से डी पे जा रहे हो उतना ही आप बी से सी पे चले जाओ। तो ए से डी कितना जाना पड़ रहा है? ए से डी जाने के लिए you're going -2 यूनिट्स ऑन द एक्स एक्सिस, -2 ऑन द वाई एक्सिस। मैंने पैरेललोग्राम में यहाँ पे एक्यूरेट नहीं बनाया हुआ, बस मैंने रैंडमली बनाया हुआ है, ठीक है, बिकॉज हमें एक्यूरेट बनाने की जरूरत नहीं थी यहाँ पे, बस रैंडमली एक पैरेललोग्राम बना दिया। इट लुक्स लाइक दिस। तो अब इसमें हम सिर्फ क्या करना है, जितना ए से डी जाना होगा उतना ही बी से सी जाना होगा। तो वहाँ पे -2 यूनिट जा रहे थे, इधर भी -2 यूनिट चले जाएंगे, एंड विल गेट दैट पॉइंट 4 3। ठीक है। अहमद रसूल, जो भी चीज़ आपके कभी कंट्रोल में नहीं होती है ना, देर इज़ नो रीज़न टू वरी अबाउट दैट। जो आपके कंट्रोल में है आपने वो करना है। सो पेपर लीक का आपको सोचने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है, आपने अपना बेस्ट देना है, और जो इधर उधर की नॉइज़ है उसको आपने छोड़ना है, उसको इग्नोर करना है। मिड पॉइंट मेथड यूज़ करके करके ये मिड पॉइंट मेथड यूज़ करके आप कर सकते हो, थोड़ा सा लंबा हो जाएगा बट आप वो भी कर सकते हो। तो आइडिया उसका ये होगा, पैरेललोग्राम है तो पैरेललोग्राम में जो डायगोनल्स के मिड पॉइंट्स होते हैं वो सेम होते हैं। तो आप बी डी का मिड पॉइंट निकाल लो, वही मिड पॉइंट ए सी का होगा, तो उससे आप सी के कोऑर्डिनेट्स निकाल सकते हो। बिल्कुल, यू कैन डू इट दैट वे एज वेल। इट विल बी स्लाइटली लॉन्गर, दिस इज मच क्विकर। या आप मेंटली भी कर सकते हो, इसमें सिर्फ आंसर के मार्क्स होते हैं, इसमें वर्किंग का कोई मार्क नहीं होता, इट्स ओनली 2 मार्क्स। ये दोनों मार्क्स सिर्फ एक्स और वाई कोऑर्डिनेट्स लिखने के होंगे, राइट। तो ये वेक्टर मेथड आप एक तरह से मेंटली भी कर सकते हो, उसकी भी वर्किंग भी नहीं चाहिए होती है। मिड पॉइंट मेथड से भी आप कर सकते हैं इफ यू वांट। रेसिप्रोकल फंक्शंस, रैशनल फंक्शंस या रेसिप्रोकल फंक्शंस के रेंज, अगेन आई वुड रिकमेंड कि आप या तो रिवीजन वीडियो देख लें, उसके लिए कॉन्सेप्ट के लिए हमारे पास अभी अनफॉर्चुनेटली अब नहीं कर सकूंगा मैं। रिवीजन वीडियो देख लें फंक्शंस की, उसमें ये कवर्ड होगा, रिवीजन वीडियो फंक्शंस की। या फिर आप ये क्रैश कोर्स वाली प्लेलिस्ट में देख लें, इसके अंदर भी फंक्शंस के अंदर आपको मिल जाएगा, टाइटल रखा होगा रेंज ऑफ क्वाड्रेटिक एंड रेसिप्रोकल फंक्शंस, ये फंक्शंस का पार्ट 2 है। इसके अंदर आपको रेसिप्रोकल फंक्शंस की रेंज मिल जाएगी। आंसर्स जनरली आपको 3 सिग्निफिकेंट फिगर्स में लिखने होते हैं। पहले आप ज़्यादा एक्यूरेट नंबर लिखोगे, उसके बाद फिर आप उसको राउंड ऑफ करके 3 सिग्निफिकेंट फिगर्स पे कर दोगे इन जनरल। जो डिग्रीज में आंसर्स होते हैं उनको हम लिखते हैं 1 डेसिमल प्लेस तक, उनको भी आप पहले ज़्यादा डेसिमल्स लिख दोगे, उसके बाद आप उसको राउंड ऑफ करके 1 डेसिमल पे कर दोगे। अगर क्वेश्चन में कोई इंस्ट्रक्शन दी होती है फिर आपने उसको फॉलो करना है, बट दैट्स द जनरल रूल। वर्किंग में ज़्यादा सारे डेसिमल्स लिख देने हैं, बस एंड पे जाके बिल्कुल लास्ट स्टेप में आपने उसको राउंड ऑफ कर देना है। इन्फिनिटी लिमिट्स की मैंने अभी थोड़ी देर पहले शॉर्ट वीडियो भी एक पोस्ट की है, घंटा पहले, यू कैन हैव अ लुक एट दैट, उसमें एक्सप्लेन्ड है, जस्ट अ 1 मिनट वीडियो। लेट मी सी इफ आई कैन फाइंड दैट एनीवेयर हियर राइट नाउ। इन्फिनिटी वाला क्वेश्चन किधर होगा? अच्छा, अभी रील्स में इधर इन्फिनिटी लिमिट वाला, सो दिस इज अ क्वेश्चन दैट आई शोड देयर एज वेल। आपने जिस तरह नॉर्मली आप करते हो उसी तरह इंटीग्रेट कर लेना है, जिस तरह नॉर्मली इंटीग्रेट करते हैं, और बस इन्फिनिटी को जिस तरह नॉर्मली कोई भी और नंबर इनपुट करते हैं आपने वो इनपुट कर देना है इन्फिनिटी को। अब बस जब आपके पास ऐसी फॉर्म आ जाएगी एंड पे कांस्टेंट डिवाइडेड बाय इन्फिनिटी, तो कांस्टेंट ओवर इन्फिनिटी जो होता है वो जीरो होता है। कांस्टेंट्स को जब आप किसी भी बहुत बड़े नंबर से डिवाइड कर देते हो उसका रिजल्ट जीरो आ जाता है। तो इसमें होगा क्या फिर, ये वाली फ्रैक्शन देखें ये जीरो हो गई, और बाकी बस आप एज इट इज सिंप्लीफाई कर लोगे, तो इसमें कोई खास कॉम्प्लिकेशन नहीं है। आपने बस नॉर्मली इंटीग्रेट करना है, लिमिट्स डाल देनी है। जब इन्फिनिटी डिनोमिनेटर में आ जाएगी तो कांस्टेंट डिवाइडेड बाय इन्फिनिटी जो होता है वो जीरो हो जाता है। ठीक है, तो वो वाली फ्रैक्शन जीरो होगी, बाकी सब आप सिंप्लीफाई कर दोगे फिर। ठीक है, चले, ऑल द बेस्ट विद योर एग्जाम देन, इंशाल्लाह इंशाल्लाह सबका अच्छा होएगा। अ, रात हो गई है, मेक श्योर दैट यू स्लीप वेल। 6-7 घंटे कम अज कम यू शुड बी स्लीपिंग बिफोर your exam. That sleep is very important. The most important thing for the exam for the exam point of view during the exam is that you do not get stuck at any particular question. I keep repeating that, but that's extremely important. अगर आप किसी भी क्वेश्चन पर स्टक हो गए एग्जाम के दरम्यान में, ओके आई एम सॉरी, मेरी स्क्रीन जो है वो कट हो गई थी थोड़ी सी साइड से। हैज इट बीन लाइक दैट फॉर सम टाइम? ये अभी हुई थी साइड से, इट वाज कट ऑफ फॉर सम रीजन। Let me correct that. तो बस स्टक नहीं होना किसी क्वेश्चन के ऊपर। आ, पहली गो में जो आपसे क्वेश्चन आराम से हो रहे हैं वो करने हैं। किसी क्वेश्चन पे आप स्टक हैं तो आपने वो स्किप करना है और एंड पे उस पर वापस आना है। cos of pi minus theta is minus cos theta. Yes, that's correct because pi minus theta, अगर थीटा एक्यूट है फॉर इंस्टेंस, पाई माइनस थीटा सेकंड क्वाड्रेंट के अंदर होगा, सेकंड क्वाड्रेंट में cos नेगेटिव होता है। तो यस, cos of pi minus theta is negative cos theta. ठीक है, चलें, I'll have to end it here. I'm sorry I have to leave now. Uh, it's pretty late for me as well, and I need to be somewhere right now. All the best with your exams, inshallah. Inshallah सबका अच्छा आएगा। सो अब अभी आप क्या कर सकते हो, अगर आपने अभी पढ़ना है, अगर आपने कुछ टाइम स्पेंड करना है पढ़ाई के ऊपर अभी कुछ और। दिस इज व्हाट आई वुड recommend कि आप ये रिवीजन वीडियोस एक दफ़ा गो थ्रू कर लें जल्दी से। आई एम सॉरी, वेयर डिड दैट गो? इसकी प्लेलिस्ट कहाँ गई? दिस प्लेलिस्ट, इस प्लेलिस्ट में आपको ये सारे टॉपिक्स के रिवीजन वीडियोस मिल जाएंगी। रिवीजन वीडियोस, तो आपको कोई भी टॉपिक रिवाइज करना है, यू कैन स्किम थ्रू दीज वीडियोस। सारे करने का तो अब टाइम नहीं होगा आपके पास, कोई भी ऐसा टॉपिक जिसमें आप अभी स्ट्रगल कर रहे हो, you can just go through that particular topics video quickly. ठीक है, all right, चलें, Allah Hafiz, I'll see you again in the next session inshallah before the next exams. All the best.